Ignition sequence start.
And we are live with the Primas in 5,
4,
3,
2,
1.
Hey everyone, it's Prima Jess.
Peace and love, it's Cindy B.
And this is the Primas Podcast.
In this episode, the Primas talk about repressing emotions and how unhealthy it is to tell others not to cry.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing today? We are sending you positive vibes all the way from Aurora, Colorado and Los Angeles, California.
Woot woot.
So I wanted to ask you a serious question, Prima Jess. When was the last time you cried? Like you cried, like you felt it in your soul?
Well, considering I get very emotional the week before I get my period. So yeah, about yesterday I was pretty emotional for no reason.
And that's another conversation I want to have, like PMS, and that's just because I get emotional too. I feel like a lot of people do. But no, my question is more around like, when did you really cry because you were hurt inside that wasn't around a hormonal imbalance?
That's a great question. The last time I cried was out of anger. I remember someone triggered me. I got really upset. And at that moment, I didn't know how to control my emotions. So I resulted into crying because of anger, not because I was sad. And that was not so long ago, I would say. Okay. Why do you ask?
Well, I ask because I feel like growing up, we were told so many times, in the Mexican culture and the Latino culture, I'm sure this happens in a lot of cultures, that we should suppress our emotions. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, when, if you ever got hit as a child and your mom would hit you, right? And then you'd start crying, which is a very regular, reaction out of somebody hitting you physically. And then you're a child, and then they tell you, stop crying, I didn't even hit you that hard. Or stop crying, or I'll give you something to really cry about. Or, so I remember those moments where it was like, don't cry, even though I was suppressing my emotions, right? Because it's just like, don't cry, even though I just hit you. Like, be brave, toughen up. And you hear that a lot. And I think a lot of boys, men, hear that so much. And when we talk about relationships, and when we talk about toxic and relationships, abuse, and all of this, because we always mention childhood trauma, our reactions as adults come from our childhood trauma.
I hear what you're saying. Let's unravel crying. Let's normalize crying in both genders.
And it's not just normalizing crying, because crying isn't always the first reaction to something sad, right? Or whatever, but expressing your emotions, being able to express, I feel sad, I feel frustrated, I feel upset, I feel depressed, I feel anxious. All of these things are important that we express, because suppression of those emotions is so unnatural and it's so harmful for our body. So I want to read something.
I like how you talk about emotions. When I was in school, we had a whole class devoted to emotions and explaining across different cultures how important emotions were, understood, and expressed in different cultures. So I think it's
What was that class called?
The psychology of emotions.
Oh.
And we learned about the 6 basic emotions, which were trivia, sadness, anger, joy, shame, embarrassed. And do you know the last one?
No.
Disgust.
I never took that class. Oh, disgust?
Yeah. And it's the movie Emotions from that Disney movie. I don't know. I think it's called Emotions or.
No, I know what you're talking about. It's called
Inside Out. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good representation of our 6 basic emotions. And those 6 basic emotions are instilled in all of us for survival purposes.
Mm-hmm. Can you provide an example of like how one of those can be like let's provide a real life example. Can you think of that?
Yeah. So when they did studies on babies, they photographed babies at like maybe 6-7 months when they're very expressive. They demonstrated this 6 emotions, and you can see them in different babies expressing different ranges of happy, different ranges of joy, different ranges of sadness, etc. for all 6. So it's instilled in our DNA. No one taught this baby how to smile when he was happy. Yes, it is considered a reflex, but it's embedded in our DNA. Otherwise, this baby wouldn't have, demonstrated that expression at 6 months old. I thought that was pretty trippy.
That's awesome. I never took that class. I always saw it, like when you're picking classes, I always saw it and I was like, dang, but I always wanted to. But that's a great movie because it's like you can show even your kids about emotions because it's a kids movie, but also we can learn from it as adults. I also want to mention that you said that it was so natural that you can even identify these emotions in babies. So because it is so natural, I like to compare it to like sneezing, coughing, any type of reflection. I'm sorry, not reflection. What is that word? Is it a reflection? No. Like when they hit your knee to see a what?
Reflex.
Reflex. So it is a reflection. Oh, I guess it is.
Reflex. It's like a reflex.
It's different.
FEFLEX.
Heated of, when no one headed. Take headed of. No one would take.
Now reflection.
I feel like Eli's gonna add that one thing about the office right here.
Yeah.
Heated. Anyway, so yes, it's a reflex, right? Like when you sneeze, it's because something is in your nose and you need to, your body's it's a natural reflex. When you cough, it's also a natural reflex of like you want to clear your throat. So we have a lot of different reflexes. And I feel like these emotions, we can see them the same way because when they're suppressed, they harm the body. And so I want to read this quote from this like research institute that explains what happens in your body when you suppress it. Like it's like when you have to sneeze and you don't sneeze, when you have to cough and you don't cough. Over time, that starts to add up because it's a natural process. And so here's the quote. Suppressing your emotions, whether it's anger, sadness, grief, or frustration, can lead to physical stress on your body. The effect is the same, even if the core emotion is different. It can affect blood pressure, memory, and self-esteem. So we're doing a lot, right? When we tell little kids, stop crying, be a big girl, be a big boy.
We're conditioning them to react like this. When it's normal, it's our human nature to want to react to something that just happened to us.
Isn't that crazy? Because we were like, especially we grew up, my mom, there's a whole chancla culture. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's like when, you used to get hit when you were younger, or I don't know if that practice is still around. I feel like it's very old school. I understand some people are still like, sometimes you need to hit kids or whatever, or, but I also wanted to talk about what that does for someone who got hit when I was younger. It also, we did learn about that a little bit. Like it creates a lot of horrible like emotions and connection to a person. Like my mom, for example, for me was the most important figure. And my grandma was too, but my mom, she was the one that would hit me. But she didn't just hit me either. Like it was just something so natural during that time. Like everybody, it wasn't like, now it's like, whoa, what? Like she didn't beat the hell out of us, but I don't know, maybe my older brothers did get it bad, but it was just like chancla culture means like, your mom, dad grabs a chancla, which is like a sandal or something, and then they just hit you with it. And it creates a lot of resentment. It created a lot of resentment in me. That's why me and my mom, do have the struggles that we have today. And it just creates a very distorted image of what a healthy relationship should look like, because this is someone that loves you and they're telling you, or the message is, I'm hitting you because I love you. I'm correcting you. I'm disciplining you because I love you. And so that sends a really crazy message,
Exactly. And kids learn from their environment. As we discussed with Robert as our guest last week, children absorb everything. And yes, we're essentially seeing when we were hit as kids, like this is normal behavior. This is normal when you're doing something wrong to hit someone. And not only we're doing it to our kids and normalizing it in their environment, as they get older, they just grow up with, everyone's going to cope with something different. Even though all your siblings might have got hit by your mom, each of you came out of that different, you know, and are expressing it now in your adulthood. So
yes, I'm glad you said that, because we are all, you know, my mom had 5 of us, and she basically just hit the older ones, like my 2 older brothers and myself. And she stopped because she even says like how horrible she would feel after she would hit us. And she found Jesus during that time. She, you know, she went back to church, and she just was like, I feel so ashamed, you know. And she would, I remember when she would hit us or whatever, she would go into her room. Like I would go to my room, she would go into her, you know, it was just like an awkward situation, obviously. But, and then when I was over and I'd come in and she was crying, and I'm like, why are you crying? And she would just make up. She said, oh, my stomach hurts. Cause she felt like, you know, it's so unnatural. Even though some people are like, yeah, I'll you know, they're so proud of saying like, I'll hit, you know, I hit my kid, or I was beat. And it's just like, that's something that we need to end in the culture, because it creates resentment, and it also leads to abusive relationships later in life. You know, our relationships, how can you tell me if I were hit, right? And a lot of people do this. A lot of people are in this situation, and we judge them for staying in domestic violence situations. But it's just like my mom, my dad, who loved me, who are my example in life growing up, they hit me because of love. And so now I'm being beat or treated horribly in my relationship when I do something quote unquote wrong. And this is normal to me. And so domestic violence is normal, you know, toxic relationships are normal. And it's like, these things are so anti-human, you know, they're not in our nature.
To that. But you're right, it does start with our childhood. And now that I have my daughter, I try to let her, my culture and my tradition, what I want with her is to allow her to express herself as openly as she'd like. Sometimes I see myself trying to say something like, don't do that or stop doing that. But I remind myself, this is who she is. She's not doing anything wrong. And I don't want her to live in a life where she has to alter herself to please me. So let's dive a little bit more into the child development psyche in a sense, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of children, you know, like when we're kids, our parents don't know what they're doing. Their parents, you know, they were trying their best. So I also want to be clear that anytime I do bring up my mom, or, you know, these topics that we're having are definitely stepping outside of our comfort zone, because we're talking about things that have been normalized in our culture that might even upset others. And so I want to be very mindful and sort of just share that my mom knows exactly, you know, what I'm talking about in this podcast. She encourages me. When I used to teach in the high school, she used to encourage me to talk about a lot of the things that she didn't talk to me about, because she saw the consequences with regards to like human sexuality. In the culture, nobody likes to talk about sex. You know, we've said this before. We said this in the gender stereotypes episode, and that also leads to, you're sending the message to suppress who you are as a human being, suppress your sexual urges. No one explains anything to you. And then you end up in these crazy relationships, not knowing, no one knows what we're doing, right? And it's so easy for women and men to be in these unhealthy situations and not know how to get out of them, because we just sort of like settle into them. We just get comfortable around them. We're like, hey, this person's here. I have a companion. We're okay. We're good when we're good. I'm going to just ride or die. And so then there's that ride or die culture that I want to talk about. I know you said childhood trauma, and I'm sorry that I took us in a different place. But like, do you have anything to say about like the ride or die culture? You know, like when people are like, oh, I'll ride or die for like my man. And it's just like her man's doing all these things, but we're told, you know, like, be a ride or die, like be down, be with it, even though it's so bad.
I don't have much to say because I would never allow myself to be in that situation, but I think my parents are that for each other. So I've been in an environment growing up with my parents like that. And I saw that relationship and I said, I don't want it. If I'm not feeling well, or if I'm not happy, I acknowledge that and I I don't want that for myself. So yeah, I'm okay with, let's do these uncharted waters of the next point you want to talk about, Prima.
Okay, well, no, I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's another one that's a little glorified sometimes. You know, it's okay for you to leave a relationship when you're no longer happy, even if it's not toxic, right? Because we are talking about toxic relationships sometimes, with how, you know, childhood trauma will lead to toxic relationships. Sometimes that's not the case. Like Jessica said, she saw it in her parents and she's like, that's what I don't want, and so she didn't allow it. My case was a little different. You know, my dad passed away when I was really young. I didn't really have like a healthy male figure growing up during my teens. You know, it was just like me and my mom. But then at the same time, you know, my mom was trying to figure herself out and she was trying to do her thing. So she wasn't really in the position or was equipped, because who is equipped as a parent? You know, you just kind of have to do as you can. And so anyway, it just reminded me of my relationship in high school was super toxic. And I was in that relationship for a really long time. So I want to say that I did allow it. You know, what you said, Jess, like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know that it was wrong. I saw people around me having the same toxic relationships, and it was like ride or die type of culture. Like, well, look what they've been through and they're still together, and that's kind of what you want. I don't know why, because now I'm like, I'm good with relationships. I'm like, nope, not for me. But like I said, my childhood trauma led me into like a bunch of different craziness growing up. And now as an adult, I kind of get it. But a lot happened, you know, like in my teens and in my 20s still. And a lot does happen to people when these things occur to them. So.
And I can't imagine how you were feeling during that time, Prima, because knowing you and how sensitive you are, and that's not a bad that's a very negative connotation, but it's not a bad thing. It's about going back to that emotion, and you had to suppress it, right? You had to just figure out, for survival purposes, how to navigate this toxic relationship, because your number ones, your primary providers or caregivers weren't there for us. So knowing who you are and how emotional you can be, and not in a bad term, again, we're normalizing this term. We want people to express their emotions and feel how they're feeling, own those emotions. Mm-hmm. And, you know, going back to those 6 basic emotions I discussed earlier, 4 of them are negative emotions. Why are we only embedded with 2 positive? You know, isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah. So why do we
that? Mm-hmm. Say the emotions again, Jess, just because they're not like fresh on my mind.
Yeah. Okay. So the 6 basic emotions are fear, anger, sadness, disgust, surprise, and happiness. Surprise is categorized as positive because, you know, I don't think it's a negative emotion to feel surprised.
Okay. So I love that. I love that you asked that question, because it makes me think of, you know, when I was thinking of like, well, what are some solutions to, you know, people who all of us have been told this, by the way. I don't think anyone's ever, maybe if you had parents that were just super prepared, but like for the most part, you know, we all struggle with relationships as adults, or we are fake with each other, whatever, because we don't know how to be authentic and we're afraid to offend. And we're, you know, there's just so many things, right? Because we're also different. But one of the solutions that I was looking at was being positive, being in a positive state of mind all the time is not natural. Sometimes, because we are human and we're meant to experience all of these emotions, we have to sit with those uncomfortable emotions, because that's what makes us stronger. I think is why maybe that there's so many, like when you're able to control, I can control my state of mind so that I'm not depressed. During that time of the month is really difficult for me. So I can't really say that I have too much control during that time, but at least I know not to be around people, or to sort of just change my lifestyle a little bit so that I can get through this time. But for the most part, I think maybe because, and we say we're always coming from a place of positivity, but I think we're also not used to, when we do feel uncomfortable as adults, then we don't even know how to go there, because we're so uncomfortable with that emotion, because we've been told don't express it for so long. Have you ever heard people that are like, I can't cry?
Mhm. Yes.
That's very common. And I'm like, what do you mean? I cry all the time, like when I'm happy, when I'm sad, like I can cry easily. And so, but that was because they were told harshly, right? Like the message to them was even more harsh, that they can't even produce it as an adult.
Or my thing is, Prima, when people feel too emotional, they also feel like weak, or that's a bad trait. And I try to make people feel comfortable with that, because I'm like, you have no idea how beautiful that is, because there's so many people I know and I've talked to that don't have these emotions. So imagine that, the 6 basic emotions we're all born with, because we're here today, we have them, and you're telling me you cannot physically cry? Yeah. Then that's a psychological thing you need to acknowledge within yourself, and not correct, but
look into it.
Correct.
Feel it. Ask yourself. And it's a practice, because like you said, we've been conditioned to suppress our emotions. It's not easy. And I'm not judging people who can't cry. I'm just saying that's crazy, because that's an example of how it can go, and how these things are very bad for our bodies. And then that's why I feel that our environment and our nutrition are the indicators of the way that we die. Like when we pass away, when we age, as in the Latino community, and I'm sure I'm not speaking just for the Latino community, but with diabetes, high blood pressure, different types of cancers, just different, like we age horribly, I feel, because if it's not one thing, it's the other. And it's, it's just so many different medical complications. And I'm always thinking, because I did study psychology, because I am studying nutrition, like we don't have to age that way. We don't have to, we even accept it. When you turn 30, when you turn 40, when you turn 50, you're like, well, when you kind of start just settling in with the pain, with the discomfort. And I always say, like, no, we don't have to end. We don't. I've seen other cultures that, like, people, for example, who do yoga all their lives, that was something just very natural in their culture. They age beautifully. They don't ever age, with like severe health conditions. They just, I feel like naturally go.
That's like the Asian culture, right? The
Asian and culture. Indian, and in India, in some places in India where yoga is just like a practice from a very young age, and they just know to go there when they don't feel comfortable. So they give them coping mechanisms to deal with when depression comes up, fear, anxiety, or whatever, these other emotions are, which is a beautiful thing. And we don't do that. We say, no, don't even express yourself.
Correct. Yeah. So that's a great analogy you bring up, because who do we tell to not express themselves? And that umbrella usually is the little boys who grow up to be the men in our societies, not to express so many emotions. And sometimes when I'm talking to different men in my life, I always say, like, oh, it's okay to cry. If we're watching this movie, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to judge you. I just throwing that out there, bro. It's cool. Like, you're in a safe space with me. I'm not going to judge you. And they're like, Jess, why do you always say that? And I'm like, because I just want you to know, I know what they told you as a kid. So I just want to let you know, I'm cool with that right now if you want to cry, because this is a super sad movie. Like Up, if you don't cry in the movie Up, are you being human? No, you're not.
I couldn't even watch that entire movie.
The first 10 minutes are so depressing. That's a good indicator. We should just play that and see, like, and analyze anyone next to us. People? Yeah. Like, that's what do you call it? Funny. Observe them.
You're such a psychologist. You're like, just so you know, you're in a safe space and you can express yourself. Jessica, like, chill, bro. We're at the bar. Okay. So I love that you say that. And earlier you brought up, you said, being sensitive and how you were like, I'm not saying that as a weakness. So growing up, I am very sensitive. And I always did think, because my mom and everybody around me would be like, oh my God, you cry about everything. Or, oh my God, this, oh my God, that. And I had to learn, to accept it. But growing up, I always did think I was weak. I thought I was physically weak. I thought I was emotionally weak, because those were the things that were said about me around me. No one ever had the intention to break me down like that. We don't have the intention to break kids down. It just happens because we don't question what we do, what we say. We just continue these generational curses, like, it's just like, well, that's how I was brought up. So I'm going to bring you up the same way I was brought up, and be lucky that I didn't, beat you like my mom beat me. That's what we get told, right? Like, be lucky that this, that, and you're just like, I guess I am lucky. You know, you're just like, fuck, I don't, Jesus, life is crazy.
I'm so ungrateful right now. They make you feel even worse. You didn't even do anything.
You get beat, you get physically beat, and that fucks with your soul. Just, that is very unnatural. Like, I'm not a fighter. I've never been a fighter. I've never been like that person, you know. I wasn't, even though my mom did hit me, like, and hit us, she didn't instill like you should be hitting others, but it's still messed up, you know. The message is still disrespectful, like, you don't respect me as a person. And parents, when they hit you, they didn't learn to be respected. So I want to make that clear, that I'm never judging my mom. And like I said, we've talked about, me and my mom are going through our own healing process, because we can at least identify where the I don't know what you call it, like where the glitches are. And she talks a lot about her mom and her experience, and that's very good, because then I can understand, like, oh shit, like, if I thought I was beat for real, right? Like, we think we were messed up. Like, you don't even know what they used to do back then, and what did my grandma's mom do to her? Mm-hmm. You know, it was always just crazy worse. And it's just like, that's why it's never a judgment, but it's also about being able to talk about these things, because some people still do feel that that's right. And again, we're not judging anyone who might feel that that's right. We're just explaining how it can come off when our kids do get older. And we complain a lot about toxic masculinity. We complain a lot about how men, they don't know how to talk, or they can't carry a conversation, or they don't understand, they're not empathetic, blah, 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 where it's like, we brought them up that way. The message all around them all the time was, you need to act this way. And then we complain about them when they're older, when it's like, everyone's doing it. Who's showing us authentic love and respect when we're old, you know, when we're babies, when our parents have to work and they're tired and they're stressed and whatever, you know, it's like, we didn't get that authentic love and respect. And so we need to start looking into that, even though it is uncomfortable, even though it's going to hurt, and it's going to, you know, we're going to cry, we're going to get emotional. I feel it's very, very important that we heal, so that we're able to show up in life happy and healthy. And that doesn't mean that you're always going to be happy and healthy. It just means that you're going to be prepared, that when life does happen, shit does get stressful, fear, whatever, you know, all of these normal reactions, that we are in a place where we can be like, okay, I know this is happening. It's okay. It's natural. It's all good. But let me do what I got to do to take care of myself in that moment, not suppress it.
Exactly. And when someone is being emotional around you, those unnecessary remarks or comments or jokes are just not necessary. You know, we really got to think twice about how we're treating each other. And I know me and Cindy have a pretty harsh humor sometimes towards one another, but in our relationship, can you ever say a time when I made you feel like that, or vice versa? Even though that was our environment as kids, we're always trying to break that cycle, always when we're around each other. And we always say our daughters are going to have a lot less trauma to grow up with, right? In our opinions now, who knows, in 30 years, they're going to be
right? F you, mom.
I know. We don't even talk to our daughters anymore.
I know.
They were so toxic. We had to cut them off, guys.
They were the toxic ones.
I know. Jeez, the way they're going. But no, It's crazy how it starts with the kids in their environment, what they're exposed to. And thank goodness for those child development majors. Shout out to them. My sister's one, and every time I'm around my daughter, she just points out things to me that I don't see because I'm in the moment. And she's like, whoa, Jess, are you really about to hit her? And I'm like, whoa. I had to she snaps me back into reality. You know, I have the chocolate right there. And I'm like, whoa, like flashbacks, PTSD, where I'm like, why am I doing this? You know, but it just takes us back there. So my sister breaks me from it. And I'm really conscious. Just kidding, guys. I don't ever hit my kid. I practice.
That's hilarious. I was picturing you just seeing red. And then you're trying. And I'm like, not Melody. Melody's the sweetest thing ever.
Yeah, that's what everyone says.
I know you were kidding. But
totally kidding, guys. But my daughter is at this age where I totally see why parents hit their kids. She's testing our patience so bad right now. And Cindy jokes because she says my daughter's an angel, but I'm like, you don't know her, bro. She eggs Let's talk about how she like cheered on peace and was just like her little supporter and doing like bad behavior. If an angel did that,
no, that's true. And it's cool that you say that because me too, when I had my daughter, I was like, there's this story in the Mexican culture. I'm sure, I don't know, it's a bigger story, but La Llorona. And so I don't know if you guys know the story of La Llorona. Let me explain it real quick. It's basically it's a legend. It's like a, whatever. There's a movie behind it, but
like a fairy tale, right?
Yeah. Basically that this lady drowned her kids in the river. And that every night the ghost is like, mis hijos, like she cries. First of all, I was a Llorona one time for Halloween. So shout out to me. But anyway, yeah, so she like people, in Mexico hear her by the river. That's the legend, right? And so I've always just heard of, you hear those stories growing up. And so when I had my kid and I was not sleeping for like 2-3 years at night because she would wake up, she just never slept through the night for the first 2.5 years. And she was just always like very energetic, and I had to work full time, and I was always working like full time. And then I was always doing something on the weekends, like just offering like meal prep classes, or I don't know why I was always doing so much. But the point is, I'm like, you know what? We need to stop judging, La Llorona, because we're not seeing things from the perspective of, first of all, this was back in the day, and you just get so frustrated as parents sometimes, and the kids, they push you, but they're meant to push you, right? They're also learning. They're also checking like, what boundaries can I push in life? But since you're the parent and you're at home and you're frustrated and you're tired, you're like, get the fuck out of my face. But you don't mean that. But so that's why when you said she tests you, and like, of course we're getting tested, and we need to be patient because our kids are just being normal, very, very normal kids. And that's literally when my mom started to hit us, because we do push it, right? And then she's like, nope, I don't got time for that. And my mom, we were struggling in LA. She was working in a sweatshop, 5 of us. In back in the day, Cyprus was a little violent, during that time. It was a crazy neighborhood. And so, you just kind of add all of that stuff up, and you kind of understand why my mom did what she did. Not saying that it was okay to hit, but I'm just saying I get it. Like,
we understand.
You get so
it's
frustrated.
All about understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're not judging, but it is an understanding and how we want to break it. So that's why if there's a message in this topic, it is that. I'm not sure how we came up about the crying or expressing emotions, but I'm glad we're talking about it. And every culture has their own social norms of what's acceptable or not. And in ours, we want our daughters to grow up with that culture. It's acceptable. Embrace your emotions. They're part of our survival, essentially.
Yes. And I think we do it to men a lot, and we live in a patriarchal world. And what do I mean by that? I mean that, the world that we live in is ran by a male's perspective. Women are suppressed, our rights are suppressed, our sexuality is demonized because we've over-sexualized women, and now it's our fault, even though we really had nothing to do with that, right? And now like women can't dress and express the way they want, and if they do, then they deserve to be catcalled, they deserve to be treated badly, and that's all from a male perspective. And so I think the reason why I thought about this was because we say that, but then also like we're not doing the work ourselves. I don't want to just sit here and complain about, I live in a patriarchal world. Okay, so when I'm around men, I know to respect them. I know to give them their voice. Like you said, I know what you were told as a child. I know you were forced to follow these gender roles that are now making you maybe not the best version of yourself, but I understand that that's not who you really are. This is who you were conditioned to be. So I get that. And that's why I want this podcast to be for males and females and for everyone. And it's never about, why do men do this? No, it's about understanding why men do it, and then taking your own role as a woman. And when you're in a space with another woman and she is getting emotional, not making her feel uncomfortable. Because it happens with women too, it happens, like my mom used to tell me, and these were 2 women talking to each other, like, why are you crying? It's just because you just slapped me with your hand. Like, that shit hurt, like, what do you mean, why am I crying? And you couldn't cry. And then you grow up and you see other people crying. It makes us uncomfortable to see others cry. And that's not okay. And it's because, like you said, we've been conditioned to suppress our emotions, that when people do get emotional, our reaction, even though we understand, is always like, ah, shit. Like, why are they crying? Why? Because just like a sneeze, it needs to get out. Because if it doesn't get out, those consequences are even worse. And we don't want that. We don't want that for our communities. We don't want that for no communities. And we're just trying to spread the message of education around psychology, because that's what we studied growing up. That's what we studied in college. And it's a passion. You know, I think everybody should study childhood development, because it's literally the understanding of kids and why they do what they do, and adolescence, you know, and gerontology, which is older age, and why that group, behaves the way that they do. You know, it's all explaining so that we can understand, so that we can get to the solutions of why do we act the way we do? And there's reasons behind it. And so how can we reverse that? How can we unlearn that so that we can have better outcomes in our behaviors and relationships? So I hope that was super helpful in beginning the conversation about it's okay to cry. If you're a male, it's okay. And it's not always just about crying. I just wanted to, we said that because that's more like the exaggerated term, but it's really saying it's okay to express yourself, whatever emotion that is. Go watch the movie Inside Out. I saw that a long time ago, but I want to see it again now. And I want to see it with my daughter. Because it's a cool movie. And also just to normalize that emotions are a reflex of our human experience. It's very natural to be emotional. We're designed this way for a reason. Let's not be afraid of our emotions, and cry when you need to.
Aww.
So yeah, you guys, we hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Please give us feedback. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have any ideas. I love that people are reaching out to us and DMing us on the side, giving us ideas on how to like grow and how to keep promoting. And please share our information if anything resonates. And like I said, give us feedback, give us comments on Instagram, Primas Podcast. Please follow us on YouTube, Primas Podcast. We love you so, so, so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. Love you.
Bye. Bye, bye, bye.